I didn't see it coming the night my father told me to get out of his house. Not because I thought he loved me or because we were close, but because on the night of my 34th birthday, surrounded by nearly 24 members of the Hawthorne family, he chose to humiliate me with the same calmness other men used when offering a toast. One moment I was sitting at the long mahogany table listening to champagne flutes clink and murmured conversations swirl around me like smoke. The next, a heavy leather folder slid across the table and stopped against my plate. My father's voice was steady, practiced a weapon he'd honed for decades. "Sign it," he said. "Let's not drag this out." And when I didn't, when I lifted my eyes and told him quietly that I wanted to read what he expected me to sign, his chair scraped back, his fist slammed the table, and he shouted, "Get out!" No one protested. Not my stepmother, not my cousins, not a single person who had shared my birthday meal. There was only silence, thick and obedient, as if they had all been waiting for this moment. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I simply stood pushing my chair back into place with care because someone should at least try to keep the night from breaking entirely, and walked away from the family that had always looked at me like an inconvenience dressed in skin. The room behind me erupted into soft whispers as I crossed the dining hall, but none of them dared to speak loud enough to stop me. I passed beneath the crystal chandelier that had hung over every Hawthorne celebration since before I was born, and for a brief second, its cold light flashed against the folder my father had tried to force into my hands. I didn't bother taking it. Whatever he wanted from me could wait. The long hallway leading toward the front doors felt colder than usual, though the house was kept at a temperature that never changed. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing back at me like a metronome counting down the last seconds of a life I was no longer expected to live. I could still feel the weight of every stare at my back, every judgment that had been cast on me since childhood. Though no one ever said the truth aloud, I was the Hawthorne who didn't fit their mold, the one who made them uncomfortable, because I refused to fold myself into their expectations. My father's voice didn't follow me, and that more than anything confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a moment of rage. It was a decision. I reached the foyer and slipped into my coat, smoothing the lapels with unsteady hands. My stepmother, Elaine, watched from the doorway of the sitting room, her arms crossed elegantly, her eyes cool and satisfied. "This should have happened years ago," she murmured. I didn't give her the dignity of a response. Some people carve themselves into your history not because they matter, but because they want you to remember their cruelty. Outside, the night air had teeth. It bit at my cheeks, sliced through the thin silk of my dress. Snow drifted lazily from the sky, the kind that looked beautiful until it settled into your bones. I breathed it in, feeling strangely lighter the farther I stepped from the doorway. In the driveway, my car was waiting beneath one of the old iron lamps that lined the front circle. I clicked the remote and watched the headlights blink awake, cutting 2 soft paths across the snow. I should have gotten in. I should have driven away without looking back. But something tugged at me, some sense that the night was not finished with me yet. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A man stood near the edge of the property just beyond the stone gate, half hidden in shadow. He wasn't moving. He wasn't smoking or checking a phone or pretending to be doing something else. He was simply watching. I froze. My breath fogged the air. When I blinked, he was gone. It didn't make sense, there was nowhere for him to vanish to, but the space where he'd been was empty. A sharper chill worked its way through my ribs. I slid into the driver's seat and exhaled, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The leather was cold against my skin, grounding me enough to turn on the engine. The heater hummed to life, though it would take minutes before the air grew warm. My phone vibrated with message after message, missed calls, voicemails, texts from unknown numbers. But I didn't open any of them. I wasn't ready to know what my father had set into motion. When I leaned forward to adjust the rearview mirror, something caught my eye. A shape. A line. I turned slowly. A black envelope was tucked beneath my windshield wiper. My heart began to pound, not in fear, but in recognition, the same stillness I'd felt in the dining room, just before my father stood and severed me from the family. The envelope looked out of place in the snow, its edges crisp, untouched by moisture, as if it had been placed there only seconds ago. I stepped back out of the car and closed the door behind me. The night swallowed the sound. Snow crunched under my heels as I walked around to the front of the car and reached for the envelope, my fingers tingling. My name was written across it in silver ink, steady, elegant, almost ceremonial. Clara Hawthorne. No initials, no flourish, just my name. Inside there was no letter, no threat, no explanation, only a folded document, thick and official, stamped with several seals I didn't recognize. I unfolded it beneath the lamp and my breath caught in my throat. It was a property transfer. A deed, confirming ownership of a private island and the castle built on its cliffs, valued at $95 million, and every line of the document named me, Clara Hawthorne, as the sole and legal owner. The world swayed a little beneath my feet. Snowflakes melted against the paper, and still I stared at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into something more believable. I looked up at the gate again. The man was not there. But someone had left me this. Someone who knew exactly when I would walk away from the house. Someone who knew that tonight of all nights I would finally be untethered from my father's control. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "We've been waiting for you." I dropped into the driver's seat, pulse roaring in my ears. The envelope rested on the passenger seat like a quiet promise. I locked the doors and pressed my fingers to my temples, forcing myself to breathe. I had been thrown out of my family, cast aside like a mistake, humiliated on my own birthday. But someone else, someone watching from the edges, believed I was meant to inherit a $95 million island. And for the first time in my life, I felt the faint tremor of something I had never been allowed to consider. Maybe I wasn't the exile of this family. Maybe I was the threat. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the house. For the last time, the envelope beside me whispering a truth I wasn't ready to face but could no longer ignore. Nothing about my life was ever going to be the same again. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a living thing, refusing to be ignored no matter how many times I walked past it. I had left the Hawthorne estate only hours earlier, snow still clinging to the hem of my dress, my father's voice echoing behind me like the final crack of a whip. Yet somehow, impossibly, the envelope had followed me home not by magic, but by intention. Someone had placed it on my car. Someone had written my name on it. Someone had been waiting. I poured a glass of water I didn't drink and leaned both hands on the counter, staring at the folded deed inside the envelope. $95 million. An island. A castle. My name printed on every page, clear and legal and absolute. It made no sense. Nothing about my life, my real life, made room for something so immense. Not after the childhood I'd had. Not after being pushed out of the family that had always preferred to pretend I wasn't there. My phone vibrated for the 5th time in an hour. I let it. The missed calls filled the screen in long, suffocating rows, half of them from numbers I didn't recognize. The Hawthorne family used strangers the way other families used napkins for convenience, for cleanup, for the tasks they didn't want their own hands dirty with. I had no intention of answering, but I needed answers of my own. The envelope stayed in my peripheral vision as I grabbed my coat and keys. Outside, the early winter morning cast a gray haze across the parking lot, condensing the world into cold concrete and pale sky. My breath fogged instantly. I scanned the row of cars out of habit, searching for the SUV I thought I'd imagined last night. It wasn't there. I didn't feel relieved. On the way to Evelyn's office, traffic moved in fits and starts. My mind kept dipping back into the same loop in spite of myself. My father sliding that thick folder across the table, the way the entire room had gone still when I said I wanted to read it, the way not one person had stood up for me when he told me to get out. The humiliation stung less than the silence. But the envelope had changed the terms. Whatever Gregory thought he controlled, whatever he believed he could force me into this island, this castle did not come from him. That alone meant more than he ever intended. Evelyn's building rose sleek and mirrored from the edge of the financial district, reflecting a sky that looked ready to snow. I hurried through the lobby, keeping my head down, and took the elevator to the 12th floor. As soon as it opened, Evelyn stepped out of her office phone, in hand, eyes sharp. "Clara," she said, breathless. "You brought the documents." I held up the envelope. She gestured me inside and locked the door behind us. Her office had always been modern and meticulously organized, but this morning it looked different, tense, as if the air itself had been tightened. Evelyn pulled on a pair of thin gloves and motioned toward the table. "Sit," she said. "Show me." I unfolded the deed again. Evelyn leaned over it, examining each seal, each signature, each embossed marking. Her finger paused over the stamp in the lower corner. "This isn't counterfeit," she murmured. "And it isn't local." She tapped the seal. "It's international. Whoever transferred this did so in a way designed to bypass your father's reach." I swallowed hard. Is that possible? For most people, no. Evelyn straightened. For someone with advanced planning access and intent, yes. She pointed at a line near the bottom. "And look, this wasn't deposited into a trust your family controls. It's a protective transfer, triggered by a specific event." "What event?" Her gaze met mine, and for a fleeting second I saw the woman who had been my only real ally in the Hawthorne world, the one who had given me advice even when she knew it would make Gregory furious. "Expulsion," she said. "It activates if you are formally or publicly expelled from the family." The room swayed. I forced myself to sit back, gripping the armrests. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "someone set up a $95 million property transfer in case my father ever kicked me out?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "And only in that case." I stared at the ceiling, then at the envelope, then at her. "Who," that she said, "is what we need to find out." She pulled up a secured window on her computer and entered a multi-step verification code. The screen displayed a web of documents and encrypted notes. "The transfer came from something called the North Star Trust," she said. "It's not a standard trust. It's what we call a silent structure. Hidden founders, sealed courts, minimal transparency. Almost no one uses trusts like this anymore. They're expensive and complicated." "So someone spent a fortune setting this up," I said. "More than a fortune," Evelyn corrected. "A fortune isn't enough to keep something secret from your father." My hands tightened in my lap. That familiar childhood dread, always waiting for the next trap. The next manipulation rose like a ghost, but it collided with something harder this time. Something steadier. "Why would anyone do all of this for me?" I asked. Before Evelyn could answer, my phone buzzed again. I turned it over to silence the screen, but the preview showed enough of the messages to make my stomach twist. "Lila, I hope you're proud of yourself. Brent, we warned you. Now look what you've done. Unknown number. You're going to pay for this." I placed the phone face down on the table. "It started already," Evelyn murmured. "What has the smear campaign?" She sighed. "Your father wasted no time. He's claiming you stole confidential documents and threatened the family with exposure. None of it will hold up, but in the short term it creates noise." My throat tightened. "He wants to discredit me. He wants to isolate you," Evelyn corrected. "He wants to make